Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Hannah DeAngelis, Marketing Manager at DICE, and on behalf of everyone, I want to welcome you to our July Recruiting Pro Tips webinar. Before I introduce our special guest speaker, just a few logistical items. First, this webinar will be recorded, and we'll actually send you the recording next week so you can view it again or pass it along to your colleagues. Second, our favorite part of this webinar is truly the Q&A session at the very end. So please send me your questions throughout. Just use the chat functionality at the upper right-hand corner of your screen on WebEx. And lastly, we'd love for you to join the conversation on Twitter throughout the webinar. Just use the hashtag recruiting2016 or tweet us at DICEOpenWeb. So with that said, it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Amy Miller, who just put on lipstick for this presentation. Amy spent more than 10 years in agency recruiting, staffing everything from truck drivers to CFOs, but obviously not at the same time. She took a detour as an employment counselor with the state of Washington, but then came back to recruiting on the corporate side, first with Zones, Inc., and now with Microsoft, where she recruits data scientists and machine learning engineers. Amy's a frequent blogger and a webinar contributor, so we're absolutely thrilled for her to join us today and talk about what it's like to recruit tech talent at Microsoft. So Amy, welcome. With all that said, we're super glad to have you here, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Hannah. It is so fun to be with you guys. And yes, I've got my lipstick on. We were talking about kind of our pregame warm-up, and that's mine. It's kind of that final step that says I'm ready. So here we go. So as Hannah said, I'm Amy Miller. I've been recruiting here at Microsoft for a little over 3 years, about 3.5 years. And in that time, I've worked for a few different teams. So I've had kind of a broad experience in and around engineering at Microsoft, recruiting software engineers, data scientists, and now that's kind of my full-time gig is the data science machine learning space. So quite the departure from both truck drivers and CFOs, actually. Some things are similar across recruiting and some things are very, very different. So I'm really excited to talk to you today kind of about our style and what we do. We kind of looked at this as a case study of sorts and tried to share a little bit behind the curtains, behind the scenes look at what Microsoft does and what makes us successful in recruiting. Not just by having amazing recruiters. My colleagues are all brilliant. I'm glad they let me play. But just some of the specific steps and tips that we try to employ every day. And hopefully we leave you guys with some things that you can start doing as well and building your own desk. So we're going to talk about a few different things. One is the candidate-centric recruiting. We do try to keep the candidate at the center of everything we do. So we'll spend a little bit of time on that, what that looks like, how you can do it too. One of my favorite topics, this could be a webinar in itself, is that strategic talent advisement. So this is in regards to how do we work with our hiring teams and how do we support and partner with our businesses effectively. There's some specific tips that I've called out that I think you'll be able to use yourselves and kind of moving from that reactive order taker space into that talent advisor that we all want to be. We're also going to talk a little bit about employer brands. There are definitely some experts out there that you should be talking to when it comes to employer branding, but I do want to kind of share my experience growing up in it a little bit and just how we use ours. And then, for some that maybe certain pockets don't have the best reputation or certain companies, maybe you're in a place where there's not necessarily a strong brand, we can talk about ways to problem solve that as well. And then finally, again, to kind of wrap it all up, what are some key things that you can do today to start, making your recruiting life easier? So candidate-centric recruiting, when I think about what does that mean to me in a recruiting environment, a lot of times we're trained or we've grown up with this kind of recruiting concept of I'm going to fill this position. I have this open rec. I need to find someone to put into that open rec. And a lot of times what that leaves us with is a lot of square pegs that don't really fit those round holes we're trying to fill, but those square pegs are sometimes really great pegs. So how do we figure out a way to be better advocates for those other talent and other people that maybe don't fit a specific role, and how do we kind of keep that at the center of everything we're doing in regards to hiring? At the end of the day, our job is to fill positions. Absolutely get that, but there's also this side effect of putting the right people in the right place at the right time. So how do we do that? One of the things that Microsoft has done, and I actually love this model, it took me a little bit of getting used to for me, but I think it's great. We have a couple of different approaches to recruiting. We have both talent sourcers as well as recruiters. Our talent sourcers are exactly what they sound like. They're out there sourcing talent. It's that easy. They're focused on specific talent pools typically. So with the sourcers that I partner with specifically, they're all in engineering. They all recruit engineers, or they recruit data scientists, or whatever that subspecialty might be, but they're looking for a very certain kind of talent. That person in a company as large as mine could fit a lot of different places. So these talent sourcers aren't necessarily aligned to a specific business. They're actually working on behalf of the company as a whole and saying, hey, Sue Jones is a fantastic data scientist with a PhD from Carnegie Mellon. There's probably a variety of places that she could be successful. And then how do we connect her to those different hiring teams or those different recruiters? So the great thing about the sourcers is they do get to have kind of that bird's eye view into everything that we're doing at Microsoft. They will, of course, build different relationships, and there'll be, some recruiters will work more closely with them than others just by the nature of the talent that we're consuming. But really, the idea is that they're able to focus on certain kinds of great talent and then figure out where we can plug them in based on what does the candidate want and what does the business need. Then you have people like me. I'm a recruiter, and I'm business aligned. And so what that means is that I have a specific part of the business. For me specifically, it's Bing Ads, and that's my group. Those are the people that I work with every day. Those are the meetings that I attend. Their problems are the ones I'm trying to solve, and so I work in this very specific space. But I personally also have a profile-based specific area, which is data science and machine learning. So I get to work really closely with that VP and with his teams, and we really get to dig deep into what are the talent acquisition issues and how do we solve them. A lot of partnership with my talent sourcers. I rely on them a lot. They have a real pulse on what's happening in the industry. A lot of them are just absolute experts in machine learning. They've talked to these people for years. They know where these people live. They know what they're looking for. They know the hot buttons. And so I learn from them all the time. You'll also find some recruiters, even though we're business aligned and we kind of have that specific focus area, we do have kind of our own subspecialties. So we get a chance to kind of dig in deep as well and maybe become the resident expert in software engineering or data science or whatever it may be. So we do also our own sourcing, though. So we don't solely rely on our sourcers. They're a huge supplement to our work, but we are also out there hunting and looking for people for our specific businesses as well. The one thing that we do want to keep at the heart of every conversation that we're having is a one Microsoft approach. This is really hard when you're talking about a 100,000 person plus company. We can talk about Microsoft culture, but the reality is that every team and every division and every kind of subspecialty within Microsoft has their own way of doing things and maybe has their own flavor to how they operate. And so we need to be really mindful of that while at the same time sticking with some core principles and some core Microsoft culture things. But when talking to the candidate, we try really hard to always make that the center of our conversation is that we're recruiting for Microsoft. And it starts with what is the candidate passionate about. Maybe it's not my open position. Maybe they don't want to work for Bing Ads. That's okay, because I have relationships with other recruiters. I know other businesses. I've been able to work with other businesses throughout my career. I may have an idea that says, gosh, you know what? Based on what we've talked about, we should probably connect you with Azure. Maybe there's another recruiter over on this team that would have the right fit for you. And so taking our own selfish desire to fill our open recs out of the equation and really putting the candidate first. I think that is one thing that we do really, really well, and I don't know how many other companies are doing that. So I think we all should be, but I don't know if that's true. So it's really bringing it back to the center of what the candidate wants. The way that we do that, we've kind of touched on, it's being able to share profiles, right, across teams. always tying it back to what is my candidate's career goal. Many times in my previous job at Microsoft, I worked for Windows, and our biggest competitor was Azure. A lot of people that I talked to, they weren't as jazzed about Windows. They really wanted to work for Azure. So, you know what? It's making those connections. It's talking to those candidates, those recruiters that work on that team, and then when they had people that maybe expressed an interest in Windows, or maybe for whatever reason didn't line up perfectly with Azure, but they lined up great with my team, they knew that they could come to me because I'm a good partner and I share and I play nicely with others. So it's those kinds of things that we need to be mindful of. And again, always bringing it back to what does the candidate want to do? If it's a square peg, that's okay. Let's go check out some of the square holes that we have and see if there's a fit. The final thing we try to do around candidate-centric recruiting is looking at those opportunistic hires. We have no shortage of open positions. I know every recruiter I work with, we all have pretty heavy rec loads. We all have our sourcing efforts and different things that we're involved in. It's not that we're not busy. So we're not trying to create work for ourselves. But the idea of that opportunistic hiring is such a great game changer for us. I can run into a particular excellent candidate. Maybe this person has, certain patents or a great background in a particular technology. I may not have an open position. I may not actually have a requisition that's tied to that kind of work. What I do have is the ability to go to a decision maker and say, hey, I'm not sure where this person would fit, but based on your business need, based on the work that you guys are doing, here's how I see this person complementing that. What do you think? And more often than not, if there is good alignment there, we will create a position. We can make things happen so that we're bringing the right game changer talent to our organization. And again, that happens anywhere in the organization. Takes a certain special person, of course, where we can't do this every day. But for game changer talent and people that can be strategic game changer hires, we absolutely don't let a little thing like I don't have an open rec get in the way. Moving on to strategic talent advisement. This is such, again, something that I am incredibly passionate about. It's one of the more challenging yet at the same time rewarding parts of my job. I love being business aligned. I have done the sourcing thing. I was a full-time sourcer when I started at Microsoft, but I love being business aligned because I love this partnership. And I love knowing that I can look at a particular team and see how I've helped develop it and build it. But how do we get there? How do we develop that kind of skin in the game and that kind of respect with our business so that they look at us as an advisor and not just an order filler? For me, it starts with having an external focus. We do a lot of internal movement. One of the great things about a company as large as mine is you do get to explore different teams and do different things, and you can change jobs without changing organizations, which is huge. That said, we have to know what's going on outside. A lot of our leadership has been here a long time. They haven't interviewed for a while. They haven't worked at other companies for many years. We need to be that market expert. And it does several things for us. First of all, it's knowing your market, everything from your competitors to what are they paying out there? What are the hot up-and-coming startups that are sniffing around our current employees? Things like that. There's a lot of outside detail and information that is so valuable to us, and who's going to get that? It's us, the recruiters, who are talking to candidates every day and who are on the front lines of this external talent landscape and asking those questions. So being able to come in with that kind of expertise and information is critical to showing up as a true advisor to your business. Looking at things like diversity, this is another key area. Obviously, we're all talking about diversity all the time. We're all talking about whether it's underrepresented minorities or females in engineering. There's a lot of great work being done and a lot more work to continue to do, without question. We also have to look at diversity of thought and experience. People who have come from startups have a completely different way of working than we do. We're a very large company. We have some processes. We have some things in place that may feel uncomfortable to startup people, but at the same time, some of that agility and some of that flexibility that they can bring to us makes us better. So being able to embrace not just diversity in kind of the usual sense that we use it, but also diversity of experience can be critical. And being able to position that with your team and getting your managers to think in those terms is huge to becoming an advisor. The kind of talent we're bringing in. This ties in a little bit to the diverse conversation, but also just what we call differentiated hiring. It's very easy, if you're recruiting engineers as an example, to kind of fall back on that same profile. I want an engineer who knows C#, that's been writing code for 5 years, and that's coming from a big competitor. That's the formula. We do that all the time. That's what works. That's what I want. A talent advisor is going to push back on that and say, yes, that's one way, but what about this? What about looking at talent that doesn't fit that usual framework? That can be such an impactful conversation, tying it back to diversity, tying it back to diversity of thought, tying it back to game changer talent. We have to look at new and creative ways that we can find these strategic people that are going to change the way we work and make us better for our customers. One of the really great things that we do at Microsoft is we have our autism hiring pilot, which I think launched last year, and this is a great opportunity for people who, maybe historically haven't shown up as well during interviews, or for whatever reason, maybe they didn't kind of fit that same mold. But through this program, we're able to offer opportunities for these candidates to get connected with opportunities and sometimes supported employment with Microsoft. So there's a lot of great work happening there. Another thing that we're doing, we've been at this for a while, is our Microsoft Software and Systems Academy, which is geared towards our military veterans. This is for veterans and active duty service members that are about to leave the military. This is a way for them to get into IT. It's a training program that also allows them to interview with Microsoft, and we've hired through this program. So, again, kind of getting away from that, here's my formula for an engineer I want to hire, and looking at different ways to approach it. This is a great way to supplement your recruiting activity. Everyone's a recruiter. Say it with me. Everyone is a recruiter. This is critical to your success. This was a tough lesson for me to learn, I'll be honest with you. I spent the better part of 10, probably 12 years trying to keep my managers out of recruiting. Please stop breaking things. Go away. Let me do this. It's really hard to let go of that, but it's also really, really important. Your managers, your coworkers, your peers in the business, they can be your best ally in driving really great recruiting efforts. So adapting the mindset that everyone is a recruiter can be a real game changer for you. And the way that you do that, one of the best ways is just to leverage your managers' networks. These people are connected to recruiters. If I'm hiring, they're connected to engineers and people in their industry. If I'm connected to recruiters, so if someone is hiring a recruiter, right, they're going to come to me and they're going to say, hey, who do you know? Because I know a lot of recruiters. The same thing goes with engineers. Engineers know each other. They've worked together. They've attended courses together. So leveraging those networks and saying, hey, who would you love to work with? Or who do you really respect in your industry can be a great way to add to that pipeline. Even better, getting that manager to make the phone call. Getting that hiring team to send an email or invite people, potential candidates and prospects to events. Things like that really open up the recruiting funnel for you and creates this opportunity for us to connect with people that may not normally take the 17th recruiter call that they've received that day. Another great way to leverage networks and expertise is through having them share their stories. This is a great screenshot of an account technology strategist who, in his own words, said, hey, here's 5 great reasons to work here. We did not give him those reasons. Those are his reasons. Those are the things that resonate with him, and he's sharing that in a way that we can then share out with our audience and with our potential prospects, and it's so honest and organic, and I love that because it's really his words and how he feels about working for Microsoft. Another step is looking at that scale and impact. Again, we're a huge company. lot of openings, a lot of recruiters, and we're spread out all over the world. So how do we work effectively as a team? And, a lot of it is, again, leveraging those local networks. My team recently did some hiring in Russia. You can imagine just the time difference alone could be a little challenging. We actually called in some folks in talent acquisition and some of our business partners in Russia and Eastern Europe to help us navigate that. And everyone kind of pulled together. We made some great hires. They're all starting to kind of onboard here in the next couple of weeks. We could not have done it just sitting here in Redmond on our own. We had to leverage our colleagues and our business partners in other parts of the world to make it happen. So taking advantage of your partners, and again, having that, it all comes back to everything we've touched on. Everyone's a recruiter. We're all in this together. Diversity of thought and experience, it all comes together. Finally, data-driven decisions. This is a critical one for me, and I absolutely love this quote from our chief, who he's fantastic. Data is the new electricity, right? I mean, take a moment and imagine your life without electricity. We would not be having this conversation without electricity. In my mind, the way I interpret this is another way of saying just how critical data is to our lives, to our day-to-day work and efforts. Tracking our hires, that's kind of a given. I think most of us do that, right? And those that come from agency or maybe an agency now, hey, if there's one thing we can calculate, it's our commission, right? We know who's starting when. But tracking that, knowing where they're coming from. Am I using the right resources? Do I have the right tools? Am I investing in the right areas? I tell you, if you're using something like a Dice Open Web and you're having tremendous response from that, and that's where your hires are coming from, you want to know that, so that you can continue to invest in the areas that are getting you the return that you need. Maybe other solutions, not so much. By tracking the hires and tracking that data, you know what to let go of. Informing your managers. This also, again, kind of ties back into the talent advisement piece. Driving better relationships as well as better behavior through information. I dealt with a situation, this has been a few years now, but I had a team that really just felt like us hanging out in a room and looking at hundreds of resumes together was effective. They really wanted to spend lots and lots of time doing that. There's a value in that to a degree, but what we found is we got to a point where we were all sitting together looking at paper. We weren't interviewing, and we certainly weren't making offers. So I tried a couple different strategies. I tracked all of the data during, I think it was about a 2-month period, went back and said, okay, this paper chasing that we're doing, this is the results, basically 0 hires. This other kind of recruiting, and not to go into all the details, but just some of the ways that I had went after prospects and some of the work I did, hey, we made 6 hires. Where do you want me to spend my time? It was pretty clear that Amy needed to go off and do her own work and partner with the team and not be, sitting with them every day chasing things. So it goes back to really just using that data and using that information to drive the right behaviors. It will also help you find out where you're getting stuck. Sometimes our immediate response, if we're not making hires or we've got positions that are kind of languishing and been open too long, is we say, well, gosh, we just need more resumes. We just need more resumes. Maybe, but that may not be the whole story. So using data to say, okay, I'm sending in this number of submittals, and that's going great, and they're moving to the next step, which is a phone screen with the manager, and that's awesome, and then we're getting to the interview, but, that's where we're not turning them around. What's the problem? It's not the volume. It's the interview conversion. What are we doing wrong there? Or maybe there's somewhere in the middle where things are getting stuck. So by tracking that data really closely, you can look back on it and say, okay, here's where I'm stuck. Let me solve for this. And it may not necessarily be as simple as more resumes. Sometimes it is, but usually not. And now finally, employment branding. This is a great topic because let's face it, we're in a 24/7 news cycle world, and very little goes unnoticed anymore. So I can tell you, in my experience working for a large company, no one has to ask what we do. My old company, all the time. They'd never heard of me. I got to really frame that conversation. I got to tell them what I wanted them to know. With Microsoft, not so much. They already know what we do, and they already have an opinion about us. so. A lot of times it's good. I'm very, very grateful to work for such an amazing company, and for the most part, really strong opinions and good opinions. So it's usually a very nice conversation. But again, some people have those preconceived notions. The best thing you can do, just ask questions. Don't launch into your spiel and don't give the standard marketing script and this is why we're amazing. Forget all that. What do you think, Mr. Candidate? I know you've heard of us. I know you know about this product. I know you're probably using Windows right now as your operating system. What do you think? Do you like it? Would you change anything? What would make us exciting enough? What would make this role compelling enough for us to continue the conversation? Figure out what they want, and that again goes right back to the heart of what does my candidate want to do? Candidate-centric recruiting. And then finally, what myths can I bust for you? What things have you heard that maybe I can help you validate or maybe overcome? I'm an employee too. Another great way to leverage your brand is follow your story. A lot of big companies already have some kind of a marketing arm or maybe a career branding arm or something like that. If you do, awesome, take advantage of it. I love ours because it's super organic. This picture over here on the left, the Geek Crossing, I took that picture and posted it on Instagram. This is not a professional shot by any means. I took it with my phone. I was walking to a meeting. So, it's those kinds of things that say, hey, check out my path to my next meeting. It's pretty. It's Northwest Woods. But this is all so natural and so organic. I mean, there's nothing here that's photoshopped. Instagram filter maybe, but not photoshopped. Flowers in bloom, those kinds of things. And then, of course, just the great stories that our teams share. And the conversations that we're able to drive with our current employees is just fantastic. Most importantly, I think we have to really be authentic. I think that's something that we're really good at internally. I love my careers marketing team. They're amazing. They let us, whether it's the recruiting team or even developers, data scientists, the folks that you see highlighted here, they've been given this platform to tell their stories in their own words. And this allows other developers, other data scientists, other engineers, whatever they are, to see themselves in that same role. If I'm a recruiter, I want to go work for another company, what I really want to know, don't tell me what it's like to be an engineer there. I want to know what it's like to be a recruiter there. I want to know what my day in the life is going to be like. And so by highlighting those stories and letting our real employees share their stories in such an honest and authentic way, it's so powerful, and it's one of the things I think we do really, really well, and I'm so, so proud of the work that they've done there. Now, it's not always great, right? I mean, it's not, unfortunately, always going to be sunshine and lollipops, and we get that. When you're a big brand, everybody's watching you. I guarantee there are people listening to this call right now that are looking for things to pick apart and to complain about. I could almost guarantee it. And that's okay because, again, we're human, we're real. Everything I'm telling you is my own authentic experience. Just remember, sometimes things are taken out of context. Sometimes something's published that doesn't land really well. Sometimes candidates are going, oh, really? You said that? You did that? It kind of stinks. But again, you ask the question, hey, what did you think of that? Was that kind of crappy for you? I mean, can we talk about it? Ask the question. Get the conversation started. What can we do better next time? Let candidates talk. Let them share their stories and their thoughts and their feedback. Quick story. I actually started working for Windows right around the time of Windows 8. Not all developers loved that. So for me trying to recruit for, that product, again, I went back to asking the question, well, hey, you're an engineer. Why don't you come here and help us make it better? We're constantly looking to innovate and improve. Come and be a part of that, right? That's compelling. And then finally, just some of the things that I hope you can take away from this. Going back to that candidate-centric recruiting, review your process. Am I asking the right questions? Am I approaching it from the right perspective? My favorite question, and I ask this every time, take Microsoft out of the equation. This is just me and you, candidate. We're talking about your career, your goals. What do you want to do? Maybe it's at Microsoft, maybe it's not. Forget about that. What do you want to do? And that gives you so much more to work with and to understand where can I then try to direct this person. Hopefully it's my team, but maybe it's somewhere else. And that's where the partnerships across the organization come into play, right? Getting to know your fellow recruiters, really getting in deep with your businesses. If you're embedded with a particular business, awesome. If you're a sourcer that's working with multiple businesses, get as deep as you can. Get to know the decision makers. Get to know the quirks and the wish list of the people who are in positions to make opportunistic hires or to do creative things for our candidates. Because remember, it's all about the candidate first. And then, good or bad, you're the face of the organization. So be prepared to speak to that and take that on. From a talent advisement perspective, it all comes back to the business problem you're trying to solve. So really get to know that. Being the expert in your field, studying up on your competitors, your salaries, your marketing, your talent pools. And I think most importantly, we can use the data, we can craft our stories around the data, and that's wonderful. But everything that we do has to be with the intent of doing what's right. Assuming good intent all around, standing up for the right thing for the candidate as well as the businesses, using that data to back it up. And then finally with the branding, you may not have an employer brand. You may be a small company that's looking at this and going, none of this applies to me. I can't do any of this. This is not my world. I get it. I worked for a small company too. What we did is we picked one specific social network. We said, you know what? We're going to invest in Twitter. We're going to create stories. We're going to take pictures. We're going to, in 140 characters or less, we're going to tell our story. And that's what we did. And it ended up picking up steam. And by the time I left, we'd revamped the careers page. There was a lot of really great work that had started with basically a simple tweet. If you do work for a larger company, there's probably already stuff being done that you can leverage. Talk to your marketing teams. Talk to anyone who may own something career specific, or if there are some career channels. Get involved. Raise your hand. Nobody turns down volunteers, or rarely do. Most of all, above anything else, keep it organic, keep it real. Back over to you, Hannah.
Well, thanks so much, Amy, for your insights and just for your presentation in general. I've certainly we've talked about this with Amy 2 or 3 times now, but pick up even more each time, and really appreciate you being here today. And here at DICE, we're really proud of the fact that Microsoft is one of our customers. Microsoft has access to our premier tech talent acquisition platform, so that includes our database of 0.2 million resumes and our innovative open web social recruiting platform. And what that platform does is it allows you to tap into an additional 18 million tech profiles. So if you'd like more details about our recruiting solutions, you can just visit dice.com/products. So with that said, now let's kick off our favorite portion of this webinar, which is the Q&A session. And Amy, as you were talking, a lot of questions were coming in. And if you have more questions, feel free to just chat me, guys. We have room for several questions. So the first one is, Amy, you mentioned early on in the webinar that in a candidate-centric world, obviously the hiring manager is not at the center. So any tips you can give to foster good relationships with hiring managers? I know this is a topic that you like.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks for bringing it up. No, and that's a tough thing for some hiring managers for sure. I think the way I would position that back is, hey, I'm not at the center of this either. You and I, Mr. Hiring Manager, we are partners. You and I together, lockstep, are going after that centerpiece, which is the candidate. So it's not about, shoving the manager to the side and saying, oh, you're not important, because yes, of course they're important, but it's framing it in the right way where, hey, it's me and you together, and collectively we're going to do the right thing, and we're going to solve business problems in the right way, and we're going to create a great candidate experience, but I need your help. That's where the hiring manager is important. Not because we're trying to woo them, not because we're trying to get them to make a life-changing decision, because that's what we're asking candidates, but it's, hey, I need your expertise and professional skill and experience and savvy to get this person to come change, game change for us.
And so, Amy, with that, a few questions around just engaging with your hiring managers.
Yeah.
What does that look like for you? How often are you doing it?
Yeah, I'm really fortunate that I have a leader right now that invites me to every leadership meeting. Once a week, I sit in this meeting. They talk about all kinds of crazy technical stuff that flies right over my head, but they're also seeing my face every week. So it's great. If I want to jump in, maybe once a month and say, hey, I want to raise my hand, kind of give you guys some recruiting landscape updates, I can do that. I've got really open communication with them. I will say, however, there's a balance there, right? You will find some managers that are overly engaged. And I've rounded the corner to my office and found managers sitting in my office, and they're not even in my building. So why are you here? We're not scheduled to talk. You do have to set some boundaries, and that's okay, because remember, you guys are partners. I'm very, very careful to not use the word support when I talk about working with my business partners. I partner with them. We are separate but equal entities in this recruiting business. I have my role, they have theirs. We should talk often, but we should talk often enough that makes sense. That doesn't mean every day, but it probably means at least once a month, more if we're in an active search with active candidates.
So a few questions coming in on closing candidates.
Yeah.
Just average time to hire for you guys, and really tips on how to better close a candidate. I know, not sure how much you can share.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That I wish I could just give you a window and say, oh, it's, it's 3 months or it's 60 days or it's crazy is what it is. Some are surprisingly fast and easy. I think my record is probably something like 3 weeks from initially sourced through interview and offer accept. Maybe it's 4 weeks, but something like that. I know it was less than a month because I was really surprised. Another, I literally just closed last week. I think we've been at it for 3 months. I mean, it's been, and I don't even mean from opening the rec. I mean talking to this particular scientist. So maybe 4 months. Oh my gosh, it's been a long time. As far as any closing strategy, though, I think it starts pretty early. That, again, can be a webinar in itself, just about salary negotiations and closing techniques. For me personally, I'm transparent from day one. I'm a big believer that sunlight is the best disinfectant, and I want to start that conversation with, we need to talk about money. We need to talk about what's important to you. We need to talk about what would make you say yes. And by getting those answers early on and revisiting those answers at every touch point, okay, last time we talked, you told me working on this particular technology was super important and living in the Seattle area was super important. Has anything changed? And making sure that you're keeping abreast of any changes in your candidate's life. And then eventually when you get to offer stage, hopefully in, 6 weeks or so, you can then tie it back and say, hey, this offer really mirrors all the things we talked about. Really no reason for you to say no, right? Hopefully that was the answer they were looking for.
Yeah. So changing a little bit from closing to really data-driven metrics. So we've got one person saying, I highly agree with the benefits of opportunistic hiring, but how does that resonate with time to fill metrics? And what other metrics do you look at then to really evaluate that opportunistic hiring?
We don't really talk about time to fill, which is great because I think time to fill is not great. It is such a varied metric. If I'm a high volume, retail recruiter, I'm going to turn things around much more quickly than an executive recruiter who maybe takes 6 to 9 months. So I think if you can get rid of time to fill, do it. I think if you cannot get rid of time to fill, and I know some of you can't, I think, it's tracking. Don't try to change anything yet. Just track things really hard for about 6 months. Try to figure out some kind of a baseline. You're like, okay, we're averaging, 92 days or whatever it is. And then if we do want to go faster, let's talk about the why. What is the impetus to speed that up? Maybe there's a good business case. Maybe you're losing money having a role open, whatever it may be. And then figuring out, okay, where can I speed things up? Am I getting feedback quickly from submitted resumes? Are we rolling out offers quickly? Once we've decided, are we waiting on HR to generate a letter? Things like that. Like, you have to look at the entirety from start to finish. You can't just say, well, I've got to send more resumes or I've got to do more interviews. Maybe that's not your bottleneck. Maybe there's something else throughout the process that's holding you up. So take a look at every step and figure out where your gaps are. Just by maybe moving from paper offers to electronic offers might save you 2 days. I don't know. I mean, everybody's situation is different, but I would look at the whole first and then figure out where am I getting stuck and try to change that.
So, Amy, another question coming in, which I think you will certainly know the answer to as you recruit for specifically machine learning and data science.
Yeah.
So this question is, can you share examples? How do you engage with high-demand skills like data scientists? How do you interact with them better? How do you get them to engage?
You really, I know I keep repeating this, but I can't say it enough. You have to make it about them. These guys are hearing from every recruiter within 10 miles of my office. We're surrounded by competitors, and every recruiter in town is calling the same candidate. So you have to start with, what do you want? Hey, I'm reaching out to you, I'm calling you, I'm emailing you, I'm whatever, because I saw something that looks really cool and that I think we could benefit from. But more importantly, could you benefit from being here? Can we talk about that? They don't necessarily care at the first step, the cool stuff I'm doing. I mean, that'll come later, right? I mean, that's important. They want to work on cool stuff, and they want to maybe a chance to write white papers and get patents and things, and that's great. But we can't start there. We can't pitch something to a candidate unless we know that that's what they're buying. So, hey, what would it take for you to take my call? I think secondly, that's when you can really engage your hiring team. So one PhD calling another and saying, hey, this was my experience, this is why I think it's great, and this is why I think you might like it too, can be very powerful. So don't be afraid to turn some of that over. It's really hard for me to kind of give up that control and, oh gosh, I'm not owning everything. I'm not having my arms around everything. It's hard for me. But I have to do what's effective, and sometimes what's effective is whispering in my manager's ear and letting them drive at least the initial conversation until we can get them into the recruiting process.
So I think we have time for just 2 more questions. Okay. Knowing that there's quite a few folks on the line who aren't necessarily doing in-house recruitment. So a question on what differentiates agencies, knowing that you've spent some time as an agency recruiter as well, what differentiates agencies that you love working with to those that you don't, and any tips for really agency recruiters?
Well, I think, again, it goes back to that, what is the business problem that we're trying to solve for here? And I, as a former agency recruiter myself, I think that's why I love in-house so much, is because I always wanted to be an extension of that business. You're writing me big fat checks every other month. Agency's kind of a feast or famine thing, but there were definitely moments where I could say, hey, I'm a recruiter, partnering with ABC company. And that was always what jazzed me. I wanted to be, kind of that outside, external, but yet still really integrated recruiting arm for a particular business. Coming with that approach and that mindset, I think, is really valuable. Now, you're going to be an extension of a lot of businesses, hopefully, right? You got to be diverse, and you got to probably have more than a handful of clients, but you can still have their best interest at heart. So starting with that, and then I think also being that advisor. That's one of the benefits, I think, to being outside is you sometimes have your ear to the ground even more than I do. You're daily talking to a bunch of different companies and a bunch of different people, and you sometimes have more insight into the labor market than I would. So bring me that information. Tell me the cool new stuff that's happening in our industry, and tell me, where's the talent at, and what's the new startup coming to town. And, so having that really great kind of compete info is huge. I mean, that's what I'm looking to you as the expert out there in the world for me. You're my partner. You're somebody who's out there not only finding great people, but also hopefully finding great insight that I can use to not only do my job better, but for you and I to just partner better.
So speaking of insight, the last question I think we will land on is one that's just a broad, holistic question, which is to you, Amy, what is the one thing, either at your time at Microsoft or even your tenure as a recruiter, what is the one tip that you wish someone would have told you when you first entered into recruitment?
Oh my gosh, there's a few things, but let me just pick one. I learned this actually at Microsoft. One of my former bosses, she's unfortunately moved on. She's doing her own thing now. She's wonderful, still my friend. But she taught me, I was really struggling. I was having a hard time with a team, and I wasn't able to really, get them to listen to me, and I wanted to do the right thing, but I wanted them to like me, and that's always tough because sometimes they're just not going to like you. And she just sat me down, and she looked me in the eyes, and she just kind of sat there for a minute, and she goes, I need you to understand something. Sometimes good consulting looks like bad customer service. And it was, it sounds so simple. I don't know if this is resonating with anyone else, but I know for me, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. You mean I don't have to make everyone happy all the time? And that was an eye-opener for me. And sometimes you do have to push back, and sometimes you do have to be the one that doesn't make people feel real good. But if we're doing it for the right reasons, and we're doing it on behalf of candidates or on behalf of the business or staying ethical or staying within compliance, whatever it is, sometimes it may feel really messy and not feel good, but it's the right thing to do because we have to change the direction that we're going. So good consulting can sometimes look like bad customer service. That's okay.
Well, I know we're at time here, but thank you, Amy, for just all of your words of wisdom. And I have been a consultant in my past life too, so that certainly, that certainly drives home with me as well. But thank you for attending the webinar, everyone. And I know that we will get lots of questions on link to recording. So look for an email from employers at DICE next week that will have a link to the recording. And feel free to share that with your team and your colleagues. And look for other webinars to come in this fall from DICE as well. So thanks for joining us, everyone. And thanks so much to you, Amy, for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great.
All right. Have a good day, guys. Thank you.